Hello, Chameleon Wranglers. Welcome to this community episode. And in this episode, I am going to do a very interesting cage review. There's something a little bit different about this one. I want to introduce the method that I'm going to be using. It's the Forest Edge 5+5, and this is the Chameleon Environment Checklist that I've talked about in previous episodes. Now, to make things easier for you to take this on if you choose, if you like this method and you want to do it yourself, I have a download that's available for free on the ChameleonAcademy.com website. And this is what it looks like. It has each of the Forest Edge 5+5 elements listed here along with some checkboxes. I have two versions. One is this nice blue gradient for online, but of course that's a lot of ink. So if you actually want to print it, I have a more plain white background. And you'll be able to find this just by going to Google and search Chameleon Academy Forest Edge 5+5. Now, I promised you an interesting cage review. And so what I'm going to do is read the information that I got. We bought ourselves a panther chameleon egg. It's supposed to hatch between April 5th and July 5th. We're getting the enclosure set up, and I'm worried we might have too many plants, if that's a thing. They've picked up a jungle dawn, and we'll be adding that. A couple of plants I had in there weren't doing so well, so I pulled them out. Okay. And got the jungle dawn put on. That is the white light LED bar. And I have a fogger set up on an automatic system. When it drops below a certain relative humidity during the day or night, it kicks on. Heat lamp has a 75-watt basking bulb, which keeps the basking branch at 81 degrees. Got a second misting double nozzle. I'm still going to clean up some of the cords to make it tidier. Looking forward to hearing feedback. Okay, so that we have everything we need to know to do this analysis. So this is the interesting twist. This is a couple that have purchased the panther chameleon egg, and we're not going to go into all the politics around chameleon egg right now for this episode. They have the egg, and we are going to assume that it's going to be a healthy hatchling coming out, and we're going to make sure that hatchling has an incredible cage, and it's got a great start here. So we know that it's a panther chameleon. And let's get on with the analysis here. First of all, we've got a dragon strand tall screen cage. And so this is one of the interesting things about the dragon strand screen cage is that the back is PVC, and that's so you can use your misters and your wall is protected. So, okay, let's go straight to the checklist, and we can start asking questions. So the first thing is the forest edge. And with that forest edge, there are three things that we're going to be asking ourselves. Number one, is the cage big enough? Number two, are there open and hiding areas? And is it networked branch? So is the cage big enough? This is to make sure that we have enough space to create the gradients and microclimates that the chameleon needs. Now, this is a special situation because this is going to be a hatchling. So the cage is awesomely big enough, and that hatchling is going to have a wonderful time in there. Now, usually I recommend with hatchlings, you get a 16 by 16 by 30 for the first 3 months. And that makes it a little bit easier to manage. But I have used the adult size 2 by 2 by 4 foot tall cage from hatching, and they do great. The challenge is when you have such a small chameleon in a larger cage that the chameleon, it may be difficult to see the chameleon every now and then because they will hide themselves in the foliage. But that isn't a bad thing for them. That's an uncomfortable thing for us. As long as your baby is healthy, you really don't have to see it every day. Now, one challenge we do have with hatchling chameleons, whether in this small cage or a large cage, is that the heat and misters and foggers, these are all powerful enough to drive an adult-sized cage. And so when we put that on a smaller cage, we have to really back off. Now, I'll talk about raising a hatchling in a smaller cage a little bit later. Today, we're going to talk about raising a hatchling in an adult-sized cage, and this is a wonderful opportunity to talk about this. So, First of all, cage big enough? Yes, this cage is definitely big enough. Are there open and hiding areas? And this is the forest edge concept, that we have an area that's for basking and for UVB, and it doesn't have a bunch of leaves, and then there is the dense foliage area, and that we obviously have that. Check. And network branched. And what I mean by network branched is we have all of this space. Can the chameleon actually use the space? Is there a branch that allows the chameleon to use that space? And in this case, the planted area has lots of perching surfaces that especially a baby chameleon would use. When you get into a hatchling, I mean, the edges of those pothos leaves are perching areas for a baby panther chameleon. Now, the area above, this is, we're going to be doing a lot of talking about that open area above. That does not get the check mark because there's no area, there's no branches up there that allow the chameleon to use that space. That may not be a bad thing because you've got a basking bulb up there, you've got a UVB bulb up there, and those are pretty powerful. And so you don't necessarily want your chameleon to be closer to those. What we will talk about once we get to the 5 gradients is, unfortunately, with the baby chameleon, they will go everywhere. So we will get into talking about effective and safe heat, effective and safe UVB. But that's next in the gradients. As far as networked branches, we'll just have a note that we don't have a whole lot of branches up in the upper level, and so that area is not available to the chameleon for their microclimates. And now we can answer the question that was in the message, as in, can you have too many plants? And the answer is, well, yes and no. Generally, what you've got right here, this is a wonderful collection of plants. The one thing you have to worry about when you start getting into a lot of plants is not all those plants are going to have access to enough light to live. It's usually the ones up on top, they get all the light and they get bigger and bigger and very healthy, and they start blocking out the ones below. And so that's the one thing you got to watch out for. In this particular case, that pothos on the right side of the picture is not so big and fluffy that it's blocking the light for everything down below. And I got to tell you, I absolutely love your plant choice. We're talking about the, looks like a Swiss cheese plant there. You've got the red Maranta prayer plant. And then in the bottom there, you've got Begonia maculata, the angel wing begonia, which I don't know that it's going to be getting enough light down there, but you just have to watch that and take care of it as it needs to be taken care of. But you've got a very nice plant situation right there. And as those things, the plants grow, you're going to have to decide which ones need to move out because they're not getting enough light. But as far as the chameleon is concerned, this is wonderful. This is heaven. All right, so next we get into the 5 gradients. And we're going to be looking at the light, the humidity, and the security. So first, let's take a look at the cage top here. So we have a basking lamp in the back right side of the cage. Got the fogger tube, and then there's a Jungle Dawn LED bar. That's for the white light. And then there's an Arcadia T5. That's a Pro T5 6%. So this is this has all 3 of the components of light that we need. So let's start off with white light. And on the checklist, is it full spectrum and does it have a bright interior? So the Jungle Dawn LED bar is specifically designed to give a full spectrum lighting for reptiles. And so check on that one. Does it have a bright interior? Now, this is difficult to tell from photographs because cameras naturally will adjust the light levels. And so I will have to make an analysis from the photograph. But remember, if you're sending in your cage for review here and your photo is deceptive as far as how light the cage is, you're going to have to make those adjustments. But as far as this one, I know that the Jungle Dawn LED bars are very good for lighting up the area. So I believe that this cage is well lit as far as the chameleon is concerned. As far as the plants are concerned, you're just going to have to watch for the plants that are at the lower level to make sure they continue to get enough light. All right, next we're going to go with heat. Got to make sure that our chameleon gets enough heat. Okay, so if you look in the back right, we have that basking lamp, and the description says that it's a 75 watt. It looks like that's a deep dome. I'm not familiar with that model of reflector, but it does look like a deep dome, so it looks like the bulb is recessed into that deep dome. And when we take a look at the heat gradient, what we're looking for is, number one, that we get effective heat at a certain basking branch, and we'll make sure it's accessible. And we have safe heat. So this is where I'm going to start saying, raising the warning flag that we may have a problem. As far as effective heat, they tell me that the basking branch has a basking temperature of 81 degrees Fahrenheit. That's good for a baby. So effective heat, yes, check. Safe heat, okay. Here is where we start getting into the problem with baby chameleons. They climb everything. And I can guarantee you that that baby chameleon is going to find its way to the top of this cage. It's not necessarily an indication that they're unhappy with the cage, like it would be if an adult kept pacing around on the sides of the cage. Babies naturally do this. So they're just exploring their world. The problem is that when they are upside down and they're crawling across the top panel, they are exposing their bellies directly to that UVB light, directly to that basking lamp. And so they're very close to these things. One thing that is a perennial problem is that chameleons don't account for being burned. For some reason, they don't get that. And so they will literally burn and not move. So you're going to have to watch them carefully in this situation to make sure that they're not going to kill themselves. Unfortunately, they can do it very quickly because they're not used to these kind of powerful sources. The UVB lamp, I would recommend raising it up 3 inches above the surface of or above the top of the cage. And that way you dissipate the first couple of inches, even off of the 6%, is just ridiculously high. We're talking UV index, I think above 20. And so it gets pretty bad. And of course, that's what the lamp has to do to try to punch through and get UVB down below. But like I've said before, these lamps weren't necessarily designed for chameleons because chameleons have this very annoying habit of just climbing directly up to the lamp. So we have to adjust for that. And the way we adjust for that is that we lift the T5, the UVB light, about 2 to 3 inches above the top of the cage. And that way the heaviest UVB is dissipates through the air before it gets to the cage. And the UVB level at the top of the cage, if you're upside down, is at a safe level. And that's why we call it safe and effective. Now, of course, raising that your UVB lamp up means that your effective UVB has also raised up. And with the 6%, the effective UVB going through the typical screen top, which you do, is about 6 inches, 6 to 7, 8 inches, depending upon how new your bulb is. UVB bulbs, when they start off, they're very strong, and then they kind of plateau off a little bit, and at the end of their life, they start going down in effectiveness. So when I say 6 inches, that's after the light has plateaued. It's an average over time. Of course, the best thing to do is use a UVB meter, but we will get to the branches soon enough. So in this case, I will say I suspect that you may have to raise up your heat, your basking bulb, and I know you have to move up your UVB bulb to make sure that the top of the cage is at a safe level. because especially a baby, and I gotta harp on this because it's a baby, and not only do they climb the sides and the top more than an adult would, they've got such small bodies and they can't take as much energy, UVB or heat, as an adult could. So you're gonna have to really be on top of what's going on there. Now, there is a possibility. It is possible that that LED bar will provide enough heat for your baby. Now, it means you need to have a heat branch very close to the LED bar because it's not designed to give off heat. But sometimes you find that these light fixtures actually give off enough heat that the baby underneath can use it as a basking bulb. But that's something that you're going to have to judge when you're there and you're taking a look at the situation. You know, it has to do with ambient temperature and all this kind of stuff. But the one thing I'll leave you with both the heat and the UVB is raise them up above the top of the cage, just because so it'd be safer for your baby. Now, the humidity gradient. Sounds like he's on top of the humidity gradient. He's got a hygrometer that will turn the fogger on and off. We've got a fogger and we've got misters, and so that's the hydration strategy. That's a full hydration strategy. And the next check mark is how do you check the hydration? When I say hydration check, that means how do you gauge the effectiveness of your hydration? And that's something, no matter what hydration method you use, you need to have some feedback as to how well is this working. Now, this is one thing that may be a challenge in a larger cage like this. The way we generally tell about hydration of a chameleon is the poop and their behavior. And so you're going to have to see if you can find the poop to see if it's well hydrated. But there's a lot of leaves in there that poop can get caught on. And you look for behavior. And so I would suggest that you watch very carefully their behavior. Do they drink when water is available? And it's just going to be something that you're going to have to monitor. And this being in a larger cage isn't necessarily more of a challenge in that manner because you'll have the same challenges in a smaller cage. The only thing is, in a smaller cage, sometimes it's easier to see the poop. But because you have such a large area relative to the chameleon, I recommend doing a lot of the fogging. So you fog at night, make sure the area is well saturated with fog and high humidity, and that's going to really go a long ways for keeping your baby hydrated. Okay, next is security. Here's our checklist. Individual housing. Are we keeping our chameleon in its own cage? No other chameleon cage mates. And we've got that. Check that. Is there a hiding area where they can escape to if they feel threatened? You've got so many hiding areas there. Boy, check that. Cage placement height. The chameleons get security from being above it all. When you have your cage sitting on the ground, they feel vulnerable because there's things that are taller than them walking around. If you have your cage up on a cabinet or something where the chameleon can be above it all, they feel a lot more secure. First of all, this cage is sitting on top of a chest of drawers, and so it's raised up. Also, chameleon babies aren't as a stickler for being above it all. They actually will find security by being low and in all of the bushes. And so this cage placement, which is very important for an adult chameleon, isn't as important for a hatchling. That said, you've definitely got to check on cage placement height. And the last one is external stressors. And this checklist item is for just general, looking around the room. Is there anything that we can see that would stress out this chameleon? It looks like it's in an alcove. The only thing you've got to watch out for with the placement there is surprising the chameleon. When chameleons are in walkways or near doors, it's easy for someone coming through the door to totally surprise the chameleon. And they say, oh, wait a minute. Because chameleons, of course, they're very visual and they want to see danger from far away. And so when danger just suddenly appears, like through a door, then that could stress them out. Now, you're getting this chameleon as a baby, and so if he stays there, he may get totally used to it, but that's one thing to keep an eye out for. Other than that, if you've got cats or dogs, they're down below, the chameleon is above it all, they're going to feel okay. They're probably not going to feel threatened by that. And I can't see on the roof, but something that also is freaks chameleons out are ceiling fans. And so, but the list is so long as to the things to check out. So yeah, I'm going to say I don't see any external stressors. So I'm going to give the check, but that's really something that you need to give a check on because you see the situation. I'm just seeing the cage. So just keep an eye out. And a lot of times these external stressors can be things that we don't expect. Like your chameleon sees a red banner across the room and decides they don't like it. It happens. And so you just have to watch your particular chameleon and see how they're doing. So that's where observation comes in. Okay, let's talk about the 5 branch functions. First, the heat basking branch to make sure that the back of the chameleon is at an effective temperature. And you've already said you are already checking that. And so that is definitely checked off. Good job. 81 degrees is a good temperature. Now, remember all the things we talked about. You may have to move that basking bulb up more depending upon how hot it is at the top of the cage and if your baby runs around at the top of the cage. So keep an eye out for that. Okay. The UVB basking branch. Okay. Is the chameleon at an effective UV index? That is going to be about 6 to 7 inches, even 8 inches when you're just starting off below the UVB light. Now, you do have some basking branches below the light, and it's hard for me to tell what the distance is. It looks a little far away. So take a look at that and make sure that you've got it. Now, I made a big deal about raising the UVB light 2 to 3 inches above the cage, and that, of course, is going to raise up whatever basking branch you have for UVB. And so you'll need a branch that is about 6 inches away from the bulb to make sure you get the right UV index. Now, this is where having a network of branches really works. And by network, I mean little branches all over the place so they can get to all and use all areas of the cage. Now, you may have been keeping the top area clear to keep them from getting too close to the UVB and too close to the basking bulb. And that's a good thought. But since you've got screen walls there, that baby is going to be climbing those walls. So you not keeping branches up there is a good thought, but it's not going to make a difference with this with the baby. So what I would suggest is raise up your basking bulb, raise up your UVB, and go ahead and stuff a bunch of branches there so they can find different microclimates up there in the open. Let's go for the eating branch, and that is a branch that allows a chameleon to eat. And this is in a cage like this, every surface is a climbing surface. And so no matter where you put food, your chameleon is going to be able to get to it. And so I don't see how you're providing food, but since this is going to be a hatchling, I would suggest just putting a cup of mashed banana in one of those pots like the pothos, and the fruit flies will just naturally come to that cup of mashed banana, or else you get your own fruit flies and you seed it and you put your fruit flies around that cup of mashed banana. Now, cup of mashed banana, that means that the fruit flies are going to stay there and they're not going to dissipate into the house, because the one thing that a fruit fly wants in life is fruit. And so if you give them fruit in the cage, they're not going to leave the cage. And the wonderful thing is that they will congregate around that fruit, and you just make sure that there's basking or perching areas around that fruit, and the baby will just sit there and just zap them like a shooting gallery. Now, that's an easy way to feed your baby. You want to get your baby onto crickets as soon as possible, because that's how you pack on the weight. And the cricket, of course, will now need to be contained, and so you'll need a feeder run cup and put it in by a branch where your chameleon can really can reach it. Okay, and then the drinking branch, since you've got your misters misting over the entire cage and your fogger, which is going to, we'll talk about the fogger. You have a screen cage here, and so the fog is going to be coming out as a column and for about 1 foot. And so, depending upon your situation, you're going to have to see how effective the fogger is throughout the plant layers. I think it'll be semi-effective, but if it's not effective enough, you can think about closing in the sides. But that's really going to depend upon your ambient conditions. But you have your misters there, and that is going to hydrate the area. The entire area is going to be affected by the water. So, yep, we're going to check off the drinking branch. You got that. And then finally, we have the sleeping branch. Hidden behind plants, no problem with that. Especially as a baby, they will use edges of leaves. So you got more than enough areas they can sleep. Is it a comfortable diameter? Well, they're babies. So, yeah, like I said, edges of leaves will work. The perching branches that I'm seeing that are up for the heat, those are a little thick for a hatchling, but hatchlings tend to be resilient as to what they walk on, because everything in their life is bigger than they are. And are they the sleeping bench horizontal? In this case, yes, I do see some branches in there that are perfect sleeping branches when the baby gets older. But like I said, as a baby, they'll probably just be perching on leaves. Okay, so there is our review. It's a beautiful cage, and it's set up wonderfully. I love your choices of plants. Things to watch out for are make sure that the plants get enough light, and just remove the ones that aren't. And the only other thing that I had to say here is the heat and UVB. Raise them up above the top, because even though you don't have the branches up there, a hatchling chameleon will climb the walls, and you're very likely to find him underneath, climbing upside down on the top panel. So just brace yourself for that. One thing I'll note about raising a baby in an adult-sized cage, there may be times that you don't see your baby. There may be days, like with mine, there were days would go by without me seeing him. You just have to trust that if you're putting food in there and water in there, that baby is taking care of themselves. And usually that's exactly right. And if they're not, this is one thing about a hatchling. There's not a lot you can do if they have trouble. And this is why we generally, I generally recommend getting a well-started juvenile from a reputable breeder. It's because there's a lot of things that can happen at the hatchling stage. But this is an excellent cage setup, and your hatchling is going to be in heaven in there. So I'm saying good job. It looks great. And I really want to know when this baby hatches. Please let me know. Email me. And I'd love to see his progress. And I'd love to see his behavior. because it's very, very, very few people raise up hatchlings in adult-sized cages. I mean, I do, but I don't know a whole lot of other people who do. So I would very much like to follow this progress. Please keep me informed. All right, everybody, that's the cage review for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and you enjoyed the twist of having such a large cage for a hatchling. Once again, if you're interested in a handout for this Chameleon Academy Forest Edge 5+5 checklist that you can take and you can use however you want to, it is available on the ChameleonAcademy.com website, and it's actually part of one of the modules of setting up a chameleon cage. So if you want to dig in there and find the actual module, because all of this stuff, if you didn't know, is on the ChameleonAcademy.com website, which is set up in the format of classes, hence Chameleon Academy. And so if you're looking to learn more about chameleon husbandry, that's a good place to go and start off with the basics course. All right, everybody, I'm going to send you off into the world. Take care of yourself. Be excellent to each other. I'll see you next time.